I'm Jim Cass, Senior Vice President of Manufacturing Product Development with Allen Edmonds. Been with Allen Edmonds 27 years.
Recently, Allen Edmonds changed some of your welt technologies to add some new features, and so we want to talk about those. So first we'll talk about Goodyear Welt, what that means, and then we'll talk about each of the individual ones.
Okay, sounds good. So, Allen Edmonds, we're known as a good, primarily as a Goodyear welted shoe company, right? So, in addition to Goodyear welts, we have hand sews, we have athletic sport type categories, dress casual shoes. The big deal with Allen Edmonds and a welted shoe, right, is that the shoe can be rebuilt from the bottom up because of the construction technique. We basically we're pulling an upper down around a last, and we're attaching it to the insole rib. We sew a flexible strip of leather all the way around the perimeter of that unit, and then we sew the sole to the welt. What it allows us to do is we can then, when the customer wears out the bottom of the sole, we can separate the sole from the welt. We can take the sole away, we can take the heel away, we take the cork filling out. We actually then take the welt off the shoe itself. We sew new welt on, put new cork filling in, sew a new sole on, put a new heel on. So essentially, we're reusing the valuable upper to the top of the shoe. Customers' foot become accustomed to it, and then we sew a new sole onto the bottom, completely rebuild the bottom of the shoe. It's a really big advantage of a welted shoe over all other types of shoe construction, which essentially, basically other types of shoe constructions, the goal is to keep that sole on forever. You never want it to come off, so we use really strong adhesives, and when you've worn through the bottom of that sole, the shoe really has to get thrown in the garbage. Ours are, basically reusable for generations if you rotate your shoes, and that's a really big advantage of the Goodyear Welt.
And so then, what was the reason behind the change?
For mine and our history of at Allen Edmonds, we've always used different types of components to build a welted shoe, okay? Our shoe, the Wilbert, we've always used a pour-on and Texon leather-covered footbed in that shoe, okay? One of the things that we're trying to address as a company is a Goodyear Welt, is perceived as a shoe that when you first put your foot into it, it's rigid. Okay, that's the perception that the general public has that have not worn a welted shoe. Okay, so what we've tried to do with the new welt systems is to try to describe them in slots so that a customer knows which shoe fits into which welt category. Just trying to help consumers understand that there's degrees of flexibility, cushioning that you can achieve in certain varieties of shoes, and then we're just trying to help describe the look of those shoes with these welt systems. Okay, so you got bench welt being the most traditional, speed welt still looking quite classic, adjacent to heritage, and then we've got feather welt, which is going to be a lot more flexible with a rubber bottom, and then we have storm welt, which really just starts to speak to the weatherproof performance feature in the welted construction that we're using. Shoe like the Strand would be of our bench welt type construction, okay? So what we're going to start with there is we're going to start with, we saw it in the factory. It's a 3.5 millimeter piece of, a full grain leather, okay? And that's what you're going to stand on, okay? Leather's great, super breathable, okay? And then we put the tape rib on the bottom. That's what we're going to pull the upper down to. All right, so we pull this upper down, and remember, we've got that cavity in the bottom. All welted shoemakers have a cavity to deal with because we've got that rib to deal with, okay? For these bench welt shoes, we're going to put a layer of cork. It's actually hot when we put it on, so we spread it out with a hot knife, make it nice and even. Then we put the sole on, and we roll it out, so that it really takes the bottom shape of the last nicely, okay? And what happens, we then put that welt on the shoe. You put the sole onto the welt. Okay, the welt or the sole for a bench welt is always or typically going to be a 9-iron leather sole. Okay, we do have bench welts where we use the day-night sole. We have bench welts where we use the V-tread type sole. But again, when you're thinking of bench welt, you're mostly thinking of leather footbed, custom cork on the inside. And then typically again it's going to be a traditional leather sole. Okay. Normal heel base, right? Full leather or leatherboard heel base, and then we nail that on from the outside. We put a top lift on it. So that's our bench welt. The benefit of the bench welt, really super stable construction, okay? Because everything, you got leather, cork, leather heel base. So really nice stable platform. What happens when you put your foot in on top of this leather insole is the heat from your foot, it softens that cork up, so you actually get a really nice actual custom footbed in the insole of the shoe. Okay, and it's really only with a welted shoe that you get that. I mean, that's the cork and the cork infused foam that we're using in our other constructions. It really does provide a truly custom footbed for a welded shoe. I mean, there's other, we see footbeds that you can see cork on the outside. I mean, really, that's mostly glue. That, for us, it's really cork. So you're actually getting a custom footbed in your bench welt. And the one you can feel it on the most is really this bench welt. That's where you can feel it when you put your hand inside of the shoe. On a bench welt, you're actually going to feel the impression of your foot, the most.
Got it.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, so then like next on the list, kind of going from like classic, to maybe a little bit more, call it everyday, a little bit more lighter, casual, fun styling. Okay, so again, speed welt. Okay, we're still trying to make a really classically styled and looking shoe. Okay, so we're still using all our French, Italian, German calf on the upper. Okay, the edge is still, where you still see like the appearance of a really classic leather edge, serious dress shoe. Okay, what we're trying to overcome with speed welt is make it just a little bit more lightweight, a little bit more soft when a person puts his foot into the shoe. Okay, and the way we're doing that is instead of using the leatherboard footbed, okay, we're going to use Texon, which is common lasting board used in the industry. We've got a layer of perforated poron over the top of it, and then we cover that with leather. Okay, because we always want the foot to be in contact with natural material. Okay, so that's what we're lasting to. Same thing, pull the upper down around the last. You still got the insole rib, exactly the same as a bench welt. Okay, attach all that together, put the welt on, then we put the sole on, and the way we achieve 9 irons with the sole is we have 4.5 iron of leather and rubber composite outsole. Okay, and then behind that we're using EVA for flexibility and a little bit of cushioning and weight reduction. Okay, so this shoe, even though it looks just as substantial as a bench welt, it's a much lighter feeling shoe. It's also more flexible, and then you also get this little added layer of cushioning in between the welt and the actual outsole when we stitch it together. So, and then in between that layer, okay, we've got this mid layer, and what we're doing now is we're substituting our hot cork in here with it's like an open cell foam, but it also has the cork infused into it, so you still get the memory of the foam to give you that custom orthotic feel, but then you get the open cell foam, which reduces some of the weight and again gives you just a little bit of extra bounce in that in the footbed.
Right.
Okay, and then also in the heel, again, really just trying to pull out as much weight as we can and give as much cushioning as we can in both the speed welt and the feather welt. We're actually coring out the center part of that heel base, and we're putting a different density of poron in this small circle, which is right underneath the strike point in the heel. Then we nail around that, so you actually get a little bit of cushioning in that heel base, and then we cover it with the top lift. So again, to the consumer, completely invisible, right? It's right in there, right where your heel hits, but we pull as much weight out of the shoe as we can to give you a classic looking shoe and try to overcome some of the objection that customers have when they put their foot into just a leather footbed classic welted construction with the bench welt.
And the main way to identify that, not only from the speed welt, is you're saying that this is where you're integrating the rubber into the
exactly. You can see that that forepart being the leather rubber combination, and then if you look on the side, it's a little bit harder to see like on a black shoe, but when we do these lighter edges, you can actually see that performance line in there with the EVA showing through the transparent inks. But again, shoes completely recraftable, just like a bench welt. That's again the total beauty of a welted shoe.
Right.
So feather welt, okay, essentially, the main change between speed welt and feather welt is really going to be the outsole compound that we're using. So for feather welt, we're either using extra light material, or we're going to be using a B-light material, which is just a little bit denser version of this, and that's where we really take a lot of weight out of the shoe. We also take a little bit more of the classic, look out of the side of the shoe too. So instead of saying, like this leather appearance on the side, with all of our feather welt shoes, you're going to see more of a rubber appearance, okay? And what we get with this feather welt construction, typically we're pairing it with a footbed on the inside of the shoe, okay? Still the same pour-on with a leather covering. We only use a heel pad here because we've got the full insert, the full orthotic piece for you. We still use the cork infused foam in the mid layer, like we had in the Speed Welt. We still use the cord out heel, trying to keep the weight out of the shoe here. But then what we do is with these leather or with these rubber soles, is we get a really super flexible welted shoe. Again, still recraftable, but really just trying to call out that this is a super lightweight, rubber bottom, flexible welt. The storm welt, again, for us, it's really, we think there's a really cool opportunity, especially like in the classic shoe market. Again, I don't know that a guy needs to have a waterproof, dress Strand or dress Park Avenue, because they're probably not going to go stand in a pond with it. But there are a lot of guys that like to wear their shoes in the winter and don't want to have to worry about the shoe, the leather wearing out because it's getting, too much moisture in it. So, we're going to go pretty big into, weatherproofing even our classics this fall. And so what we're doing there is the upper leather is all waterproof leather. So we're using a waterproof leather. And then we're behind that waterproof leather, instead of the cotton doubler, we're using a waterproof breathable membrane. And then we're sealing off all the seams, okay? And then we still make it into a welted shoe. So you get the recraftability. You're going to not get a waterproof shoe, so you don't want to go stand in a pond and hope that water won't sooner or later seep through. But all the leathers are going to be safe to wear all winter long. The we're actually using the Vibram Arctic grip in a couple of boots, so you actually get some real grip behind it. And then in our classics, you can go outside and wear it with a suit and know that you got an actual weatherproof leather that's beautiful, and it's going to last you all winter.
Okay. So not only is the storm welt weatherproof like other Goodyear welts, but also you're incorporating waterproof leathers.
Waterproof leathers, and then the waterproof breathable membrane. So, if you do really get stuck out there in a storm, you don't have to worry about the water seeping through your leather and then also through that interior barrier now too. So, it's truly a weatherproof shoe. So when we say it's a storm welt, think of it like that. Typically it's going to be of a bench welt type, makeup, but it's going to have the waterproof leathers and then the waterproof breathable membrane in it.
Got it. So those are the new welts from Allen Edmonds. Thank you, Jimmy, for walking us through those. Very fascinating. And if you have any other questions, we'll link to some more resources below at allenedmonds.com.